Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, as you see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where we'll be talking about, I don't really know what we'll be talking about. What was I doing yesterday? Yesterday, of course, playing some games with my friends, that sort of thing. I drew a new icon for the D&D server that I've set up for when it eventually starts. It will be soon. I think it's planning to be soon. Basically, most of the character discussions are done. I will say some of them I definitely need to follow up and check, being like, hey, is this okay? Is there anything else we need to go over? But then hopefully a session 0 will actually start where we can actually roll some stats and stuff. But hello everyone, right now in Fawnhallow, it's 3:13 p.m. on Sunday, January 28th, 2024. One of my friends was just like, you should put like an icon on the server or something. I was like, oh, I don't really like have an icon or something. And then, you know, she was drawing late last night, so I was like, you know, I'll draw as well. Why not? I'll draw an icon. So it's basically, it's just D. What can I say? It's this D, and she's in a cloaked hood. It's got like a greenish blue sort of background, and there's like a D20 in the bottom left, which says 20 on it, but you can't really see it because it's really quite small. I think you could probably see it in the larger version, at least I could. But you can't really see that sort of thing. And she's got like a hooded veil on, and like her eyes are sort of like glowing. It's like, it's meant to be like somewhat eerie and mystical is a vibe. I actually drew 2 variations of this. I drew a natural 20 version, and I drew a natural 1 version. And the natural 1 version is like got a red background and that sort of thing. She's got a much more like upset looking expression, I guess. It's not like quite angry. It's a sort of like intentionally meant to be a little bit ambiguous, I suppose, but I would say it's a bit more like sneery, I suppose, but also like a frown is like a bit bigger, so it's like kind of reads as a smirk, kind of not. Anyway, you wouldn't even be able to see it because the Discord server icon, as I'm now looking at it, is way too tiny. Like I can't even see what her facial expression is on this one. You can only see the eyes and the hood. But I did make a natural 1 version, and my initial plan was gonna be make it a GIF and then like have it sort of like swap back and forth between the two, because I was like, that's kind of cool. Like I've seen some other servers that I've joined do that, like they're not animated, but when you hover over them, they're animated. Let me see if I can find one. Like a Shiny Colors Discord server does it. Is that literally the only one? Kaching Means apparently does it. Wow. None of the others do it. And I was going to do that. I'd be like, oh, you know, and let's just do it. And it's like, oh, it turns out you need your server to be boosted for that to happen. So, you know, that has ended up not happening. But I still have this natural 1 version, and you know, maybe I'll use it at some point. I don't know. Maybe it's like when stuff starts going really bad, I suppose, in the server, and not the server, sorry, the campaign. I'm like, oh, let's switch to the evil version. So that's a bit fun, you know. I haven't done like a huge amount of drawing recently. Genuinely, I've just been like a little bit too busy trying to like work out other stuff as well. The only drawing I've done recently is that icon, and I'm drawing the next thumbnail art for the series, which is following on from Goodbye Volcano High. And then soon after that, I will need to draw the thumbnail art for the one which will be following on from Railbound. I feel like Railbound probably has quite a few more episodes, more than I expected, left in it, mainly because these the levels which are left are like really hard. The one I just recorded is like, I think it's maybe the hardest level thus far. Like I genuinely, like, it's so difficult, I don't even know like how to begin to even dissect what the answer is. But of course, everyone finds their own difficulty in different ways. But yeah, what else should I really chat about? What else should I really talk about? I don't really know, to be honest. Apart from that, I haven't really been up to all that much, you know. It's nice to get back into the swing of drawing things. I was also thinking about this because my friend, you know, she's like, I won't say recently taken up drawing, but you know, within the last like year or so, starting to take up a lot more drawing, and she is doing it a lot more regimented than I certainly did. I basically started drawing, you know, from a motivation of being like, oh, I just kind of want to draw random things, and then I just like learned that way. But she's doing it from a much more sort of regulated way. She's doing like posture drawing, form drawing, like learning the basics, I suppose, before. Well, I don't necessarily know what she intends to draw eventually, but we'll see. And I definitely sort of like reflected upon that, you know, seeing her do it and being like, you know, this is definitely something I should do as well. You know, I should go back and like learn the basic fundamentals, because of course I never went to art school. I didn't even take like art lessons. My extent of my art lessons were like pre-GCSE, because I don't know how it works necessarily in any other schooling system, but in the UK system, what you basically do in secondary school or like primary school, you kind of like learn whatever. It's kind of like up to the whims of your teacher for what they want to teach you. And in secondary school, you have years 7 and 8, so the first 2 years. and most of year 9 to basically, you kind of like learn a bit of everything, although it's honestly very skewed toward maths and science, because maths and science we had a total of like 6 hours each week about it, and then like drama was like 1 hour like every other term or something. It was like, obviously, depending on the school you go to, it was a lot more biased in one direction or another. But then towards the end of year 9, I believe, you basically need to select the subjects that you'll be taking forward as GCSEs. And at least in my school, the mandatory ones where you had to take maths, you had to take both types of English language, English lit, you had to take all 3 sciences, so biology, chemistry, physics, so that gave you 6, and then you had 4 flex slots. One of them had to be a modern foreign language, in our case being French, Spanish, or German, and then one of them had to be humanity, i.e. geography, history, or religious studies, and then the other 2 were completely free. You were basically free to choose what you want. So you only had 2 options, and in my choice was I did French and geography for the lock-in ones, and then I did history and electronics for the other ones. Which, I've said many times before, I regret taking history. Not because, like, I think it was a bad subject or, like, I didn't find it interesting in somewhat, but it was definitely my least favourite subject, and I would have definitely enjoyed taking graphics, like, about 1,000 times more, I think. And it's so silly, because I think back to it and I'm like, I was really good at graphics, I love graphics, and then I was just like, but I shouldn't do graphics, because how's that going to help me in the future? How's history going to help me in the future like this? I mean, obviously I'm not going to say history has no use, but like, I can't use that same logic and be like, graphics can't help me if history can't help me either. Like, I mean, half of subjects don't even help you, to be honest. It helps you on the base level, I suppose. I suppose I can write essays if I wanted to, or be able to communicate clearly in written formats, which, I definitely won't dispute, and I'm not going to say history didn't help that. But it's the sort of thing, like, it's not the most relevant thing to my, like, it's as relevant as me knowing how rivers are formed from geography, essentially. And then you might say, okay, well, geography is more about case studies and that sort of thing. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Okay, then we can keep this point going on and on. But the point is, hopefully you understand what I was getting at. I don't remember why I was talking about this. I actually just like completely lost the point of why I was talking about this in first. Oh yes. Anyway, so that was basically when my art education stopped, like at the end of year 9, because I just didn't take on any more artistic subjects. So I basically didn't do any, I suppose, artistic learning from when I was 14 up till when I started drawing, which is like the start, maybe a little bit before university, so like 18ish or something. But even then, of course, it wasn't actually like proper learning. I was just kind of like improvising. I was like, I'm going to try and draw this, and I draw it, and I'm like, this looks terrible. But I was thinking about this because I remember thinking about it the last time I was like actually drawing like reasonably often. I was like, I'm pretty sure I've reached, not necessarily reached my limit, but I probably reached a feasible, like a reasonable limit of what I can do without learning fundamentals at this point. And I haven't learned, like, been avoiding fundamentals as a way of sort of like, I hate like basic learning or training or that sort of thing. No, I love learning things. I think that probably shouldn't be a surprise to you necessarily, or depending who you are, I guess. Like, maybe, I guess if this is your first time watching, well, more power to you for joining at day 1,400 and something. That's pretty crazy. But it probably shouldn't come as a surprise to you that I love learning new things, like, a lot. I don't know, it's just sort of like a mix of, I'm sure it's complacency, and also a mix of like, it's hard to prioritize it timing wise. Like, it takes effort to learn things from scratch from the beginning. Not saying that it's not worth it, it absolutely certainly is, but it's just like, it takes time. And when I was like still improving, I think despite not learning the basic fundamentals, I was like, this is fine, like I can keep us going for a little bit anyway. And especially more difficult when I didn't have time, because, like I would be working on commissions or something. It's like, it's a bit difficult to fit in time as well to also be like, let's learn figure drawing or posturing or something like that. But now I don't really do commissions all that much anymore, to be perfectly honest. Like, I don't think I've opened them up for like half a year maybe. Mainly because I've just been too busy, and I was like, I definitely could not work on it. I was thinking as I was doing some other commissions, I was like, I feel bad for clientele who are like, probably waiting much longer than they have to for me to work through these sort of things. But I was thinking about it towards the end. I was just like, I very much feel like I'm stagnating. So the only thing really left for me to do was like, let's properly learn like the fundamentals again. Let's learn how to draw like proper bodies and posture shapes. It's amazing I've got as far as I have, to be honest, without fundamentals in the first place. And I'm sort of two minds about it. Like, I feel ideally the way you should learn anything is you should learn the things which are fundamental building blocks to whatever hobby, skill, ability that you're trying to acquire, right? It just makes sense. Like, if I was to put it in a more mathematical sense, you would learn how to be comfortable with basic arithmetic before you start delving into, I don't know, like geometry or something like that. It just makes sense. Geometry is quite a basic building block. Maybe I'd say something like calculus, which you might argue, hey, okay, that's a fundamental building block, as in it's like used everywhere, but it's not like one of the fundamental things that you learn straight off the bat. But at the same time, I also understand that if it's not something which, how should I put this, not like makes or breaks your life, but is like fundamental for your life to continue onwards. Like, i.e. you don't need the ability for a job. It's a hobby. It's something you're doing in your spare time. You're doing it just because you want to do it, not necessarily because out of any obligation to do it. Then there's not really much of an external pressure, I suppose, to learn how to do something properly straight off the bat, which is interesting, because I feel like if you, now I'm sure this doesn't apply to every single hobby or skill, etc., etc. I'm sure some of them, like if you're doing underwater welding or something, you probably should learn your safety precautions first. But at least coming from the stance of drawing, I think some people will grossly underestimate the power something as flimsy as motivation can bring you. I go on and on about how I rate diligence much more highly than motivation, or like the random wanton desire to do something, you know. It's the sort of thing where motivation can be flimsy, you know. You kind of need diligence to set up a genuine structure so that you actually do something again and again and again, and once you have it as a secondary part of your routine, it's just like, that's it, it's like locked in. That of course doesn't apply to everyone, I'm sure, but it applies to me and a lot of people I'm sure it does apply to as well. But motivation can still be a powerful tool too, because there's no point in learning, I suppose, from the basic fundamentals of drawing if you aren't going to want to do it, you know. Like, the same way that the youth is wasted on the youth, or something like that. It's like, you don't really appreciate, I suppose, what it's doing for you. You don't really understand, not necessarily understand, you can conceive of why you would do it, but the motivation, it doesn't feel like it's necessary there, I suppose. So that's why, you know, if someone wants to start drawing, and they like drawing like random like anime characters or something like that, despite the fact they don't know how to draw body proportions, they don't know how to draw faces, eyes, anything like that, go for it. Like, that if that's what's motivating you to draw, if that's what's getting you started to pick up a pen and put it to paper, then keep it going. Eventually, you'll hit the point, and, you know, provided that it's something that you want to take further, you'll be like, my skill's not improving. Now you have that motivation to go back to the basics, to do the things which are regularly seen as more boring or basic, or not necessarily fueled by your external hobbies or interests or likes, right? I feel like it only makes sense that way. You know, which it certainly is backwards. And again, I must reiterate, I don't think it applies to every single hobby or skill or ability out there, but it certainly, I think, applies to drawing and many other things, to be honest, where you got to, you know, you got to catch that sort of like spark, that fire, which keeps you going into wanting to experience it further, and then let that fire build into like the spark, into the tinder, I suppose, for actual set up base for a campfire. And then you can start adding the fuel of the basic fundamentals to it to actually, you know, branch out from there. Now, if you have like a regularly structured school system, then maybe, you know, I'm not going to be like, school should just let you draw whatever and then teach you the basic fundamentals halfway through. That's not how it should go. I'm just saying, like, in school itself should probably teach you the fundamentals. It should give you a regularly structure where you know how to do something and how you can refer back to these lessons, etc., etc. But I'm just saying, like, your motivation outside of school, the things you do in your spare time, can be drawing whatever, you know. While it's certainly good to practice in that some sense, it's also good to keep the fire burning, is what I mean. And I feel like certainly fundamental things tend to be seen as a more boring things, of part of hobbies and skills and abilities. So, I mean, if you don't find it boring, then absolutely go for it. You know, it's very lucky, I think, to not find the basic steps boring. But I would argue probably at that point you already have a strong enough motivation for the entire skill interest as a whole, rather than the skill as, you know, a passing interest, which is what I feel like I'm focusing on mainly. That's probably like 20 wishes. I don't know. I haven't really been counting. So yeah, at some point I need to, as I say, at some point, you know, let's I need to set up like a regular pattern again to be like, let's practice like figure drawing or expressions or emotions, you know, let's learn how to draw animals properly, you know, so I'm not just like vaguely trying to mimic things I've seen before, which, while certainly good, you know, and I'm not going to say that like learning from others is not a valid skill to be having. It's only one tool in a repertoire of different learning environments which you can foster, and like restricting yourself to one, I think, is doing yourself a disservice. So I don't know, I guess this is like one of those life advice with dear darling videos. I feel like I spoke about this topic before, but I'm not entirely sure, to be perfectly honest. And I'm sure I'm going to feel that way about like writing or something at that point as well. You know, we have a writing group which has been on a little bit of hiatus for a while. I was meant to revive it recently. I kind of forgot about that, to be perfectly honest. Cool, okay. That's kind of been like on the background for a bit. I've been like, I forgot to revive it like recently, and I should do that. I'm not, maybe I'll send a message after this, I don't know. But I'm sure also other people are like, you know, because there's a big overlap between the people in that group and the people who are in this Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I'm sure there's sort of like a desire to see the D&D get started first, I suppose, necessarily from the writing group. But I'm sure it's the same thing with writing, you know. I'm at the stage where I'm just kind of writing whatever I want. I'm sort of mimicking things I've seen before, or like trying to draw upon inspiration I've seen before. There's not that much like knowledge which is going into it. I don't necessarily know about that deeply within writing, except for the concept of, you know, things like show but don't tell. But then you of course, you know, the next step will be elaborating on that, being like, show but don't tell is of course an important thing to keep in mind, but you know, rules are made to be broken and all that sort of thing. Some things you do just want to tell because, you know, it's pointless to show that thing, you know, and over reliance on a hard and fast rule is a fantastic way to limit creative expression. But so I'm sure that will come with writing as well, you know, like I'm currently being carried by the sort of the kindling flame of like, oh, I get to kind of do what I want, I get to experiment and have fun, and I'm sure I'm at some point, which I was definitely starting to feel like the stagnation coming, I think, when I was doing some of the more recent stories, being like, the stagnation's coming, I gotta like learn my fundamentals, you know, I gotta learn up like story arcs and structure and something like that. Literary techniques to help convey the message I want across properly, rather than relying on the same ones over and over again. Challenge yourself, etc., right? Improvement is not without challenge in the first place, I suppose, so it kind of only is expected that they would be hand in hand. And maybe it's kind of obvious to sort of say aloud, and I guess it is, but you know, it doesn't mean it doesn't bear repeating. It doesn't mean it doesn't hold any sort of value whatsoever just because it's something which is much more blatantly stated. That's just my thoughts on it, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, I don't know, there's a lot of things. There's music as well, which I need to very much get back in the swing of. I think one major thing which is stopping me from, like, it sounds so silly, but it's amazing how the smallest of like barriers and boundaries can prevent you from doing something, you know. And my small barrier which is preventing me from playing a piano more often is the fact that I keep putting stuff on top of my piano. I got to stop using it as like a mini table, so then it's much easier. Then there's not like a physical barrier in the way of like actually me playing a piano or something in the first place. There's also like a tangle of cables which I need to sort out and figure out what I'm doing with that, which are all buried underneath the piano, which certainly makes it look like a mess. I don't even know why I've done that, to be perfectly honest. Like, why have I not just moved this, like, to the underside of my bed or something? Does my piano plug in there? I don't even remember. Maybe it does. Maybe that's why I've done it. But even still, I can move it to the side of the piano rather than putting it all underneath the piano. What was I thinking? Anyway, that's like a rather long-winded rant, I suppose, about this concept in the first place, which I'm like, alright, sort this out. Sort this out, dear darling. How easy is it to sort out? Not easy, I suppose, but that just do be how it goes. I don't want to sell these star fragments necessarily. Let's sell some fruits. Let's not sell that. Let's sell that. Sell that. That's a lot of wood. That's probably something which is from our storage, which I went towards me. Why didn't I put it away? I don't know. Clearly I was not paying enough attention. I'm not in the Charlie Puth song way of wanting attention. I don't know. One of the weaker links I think I have. What song is stuck in your head today, dear darling? Just before we round off this episode, it's still the Has Been Hotel ones. I'm not going to sing them because some of them I suppose have much more explicit themes, but Poison is certainly stuck in my head. Still not seen the show? Saw the music video, I came to it, and I was like, whoa, intense. Anyway, I'm going to round this episode off here. Just a random sort of tangent of a conversation. But if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Adam across the New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.